Welcome to the mock hearing portion of today's training. I am Amber Lammers, an Associate Director in Mizzou's Office of Institutional Equity. You will see me playing the role of hearing officer in the mock hearing that you are about to watch. But first, a brief introduction. You received copies of the investigative report and exhibits. Hopefully, you had an opportunity to review those materials, as today's mock hearing is based on that scenario. All the characters in today's mock hearing, including the panelist, the parties, the witness, and advisors, are part of the OIE team at Mizzou. It is important to note that this is not a real case. We have drawn on our experiences and common themes from real incidents reported to our office, but this is a work of fiction, including the names, locations, and specific set of facts. Some of you may even recognize the scenario from a few years ago. Recycling, it's good. However, even if you remember facts from the IR a few years ago, the recording is new, fresh from production just this summer. Our goal is to provide a realistic example of the types of cases you may encounter as a panelist, including the tough policy questions you'll need to decipher, like whether a complainant was incapacitated at the time of sexual activity, and was there consent to sexual activity. This fake case is under Title IX policy, meaning that there is live cross-examination by advisors. As you know, in an equity case, for example, if this same scenario occurred off campus, there would be some procedural differences which you are learning about in other sessions of today's training. It is important to note, though, that there is a hearing officer for all hearings involving conduct that is alleged to have occurred on or after August 14th, 2020. So that goes for both Title IX hearings and equity hearings. There will be a hearing officer and two panelists instead of one of you serving as a hearing chair. So that's new for this year. You'll notice that the recording starts with the hearing in progress. For the sake of time, so we could show you more questions and substantive exchange of the hearing, we omitted the hearing officer's opening dialogue. You have received a copy of the script or outline that hearing officers use to have everyone introduce themselves, go over the ground rules, acknowledge that the parties received notice and relevant materials, etc. There are several items of business included in that opening, but for today, we'll start with the complainant's statement. If you'd like to follow along, skip to that page of the script now, and I recommend taking notes as we go so that you don't forget questions or other items to discuss as the mock hearing ends. One final note, both the investigative report and mock hearing are abridged and missing some needed details. In real life, the investigative report would likely be longer, and it would include more information in various places. So take the opportunity today as you're watching to note additional information that you would want included in the IR, as well as questions you would want to ask as a panelist in order to complete the record and make a decision. Thank you so much for your service. Okay, are there any other matters or questions that need to be addressed by the hearing panel before we proceed? Seeing none, does anyone need a break before we continue? All right, we are good to go. We will now hear from the parties and any other witnesses in this case. We ask that you answer truthfully and abide by the university's principles of respect, discovery, excellence, and responsibility. First, the complainant, Michelle Brewer, will be given an opportunity to make a statement. Then the hearing panel may ask questions, followed by cross-examination by the advisor of the respondent. There will be a break after the hearing panel asks questions so that the respondent may confer with his advisor. One last check. Does anybody have any questions before we proceed? Michelle, are you ready to make a statement?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead.
First, I want to thank you all for being here today to give me an opportunity to discuss this incident. What was supposed to be a fun night with my friends turned into literally the worst day of my life. And I was really hurt by a person that I thought I could trust. On the night that this incident happened, I had plans for a fun evening with my friends. I had pre-gamed with a friend before going to a party where Jacob was present. After arriving at the party and consuming more alcohol while I was playing drinking games, I remember starting to feel sick. I know I sat down on the couch, and at one point I remember standing around the living room talking with our group of friends, but I'm not really sure what happens after that. The next thing that I remember is being in Jacob's bed with no shirt on. No idea how I got there. Jacob being on top of me, kissing me and touching my breast. I remember that I wanted to pull away, but I couldn't. I feel like I couldn't pull away or I couldn't say anything. And I remember that Jacob didn't stop. He continued what he was doing. My memory again is really unclear after this moment until the next day when I wake up confused and undressed in Jacob's room, feeling very scared. I quickly left his house and I later text Jacob to ask what happened. And Jacob replied to me the same thing that always happens when we get together. I want you to know that that's not true. This was not the same thing that would happen every time we would get together. It is true that Jacob and I have had consensual interactions prior to this. We've even had some of those interactions happen after drinking. But what's different is that I was not just drunk this time. It wasn't tipsy. I was incapacitated. Even though alcohol had been involved prior times we've had sex, I remember those interactions. I can recall the details, and I can't do that from this night. Not remembering a large portion of your night is scary enough, but being told later that something happened that you didn't even consent to is terrifying. This has impacted my life and my friendship and my education in ways that I never could have imagined. And I really hope that you will hold Jacob accountable for this incident. And I hope that he learns from this so that he never harms another person again. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we will do questions by the hearing panel. Are you ready if we proceed with that, Michelle?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. To my fellow panelists, do you all want to start? Do you have any questions?
You mind if we take a break to discuss?
Sure, let's do that. The time is 1:19 p.m. and we are going to stop the recording for a brief recess. We are ready for questions from the hearing panel for Michelle. Mindy, would you like to start?
Yes. Hi, Michelle. I had a couple of questions about some aspects of the party as sort of reviewed in the investigative report. There was a mention of there wasn't food at this party. Can you tell me what you remember about the food and drinks that were there?
Yeah, there wasn't food. I mean, it was kind of later. I know I didn't eat dinner before I went. I don't remember if I knew if there was going to be food there or not, but when I got there, there wasn't really much. I had some chips and dips and salsa. There were like a few snack things kind of like that, but not like a lot of actual food. And then I mean, everybody kind of brought alcohol, or there was some kind of things already available there at the house for people to share. So some people were drinking things that they brought or drinking things that they had at the house when we got there.
Okay, thank you. And then I know you had said that you did not recall spilling a beer on you until you were told that. Do you remember having that beer at all?
I don't and I don't really know when that happened, like during the course of the night. My guess would be it had to have been sometime after I went to sit down on the couch, because that's really kind of where my memory starts to get blurry. I don't remember drinking a beer or spilling one on me. Jacob told me that happened. And then I did see a stain on my shirt that I had been wearing the next day when I looked, but I don't recall drinking it or where I got it or if someone else gave it to me. I've absolutely no idea that I was drinking a beer or where I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Michelle. I was curious to know if you felt that the amount of alcohol you had at this particular party was about the same as what you had used in previous interactions with Jacob.
Um, and I talked a little bit about this with the investigator. I didn't feel like, before my memory gets fuzzy, I don't feel like what I drank was maybe an abnormal amount. I did maybe have less to eat that day, like prior to the party. And as we just talked about, there wasn't food at the party. So I mean, before that point, I didn't feel like it was an unusual amount, but then I also apparently was drinking beer that I don't remember drinking. So I'm also not sure how much or what other alcohol I could have consumed in that time, that my memory is really unclear about what happened kind of at that point.
I only have one other question. You and Jacob had past sexual history before this incident. Did you anticipate that this evening would include some sort of sexual contact with him based on that past history?
And I didn't really like go into the night planning that. I mean, and I had even taken a friend with me to this party because I knew I wouldn't know everybody that was there. So I think it would have not been something that would have been kind of on the forefront of my mind going into this party, that's how the night would have ended.
Thank you.
I
I
have a
have-
quick follow-up. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead,
Trying to
Mindy.
think of it. In the investigative report, there was a discussion from the witness that I believe the two of you had spoken about, like she left at some point and you had the plan for that. Was there a plan where you intended to stay a certain amount of time or potentially stay the night?
Uh, I don't remember us talking about that. I mean, I had spent the night there before, so I can understand why she would have thought that that was like not unusual for me to stay, but we never, as far as I can remember, didn't talk about me staying. We like had this plan of when we would go, and not specifically like a time we would leave, but I know we talked about like how we would get back together because we knew that we would be drinking. So I know we did talk about like getting an Uber and doing that. We Ubered together to the party. So I know we had those discussions, but again, I mean, it wouldn't have been the first time I stayed over there. So I can understand why she might have thought that that was not unusual when she couldn't find me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have just a couple of questions as well, Michelle. Going back to the part of the evening where you stated that you were not feeling well, and that you felt that it was obvious to others, that it would be obvious to them around you that you were not feeling well. Can you talk a bit about what others would have seen from you that would have given them that indication?
I mean, before this, like before I sat down on the couch when I stopped feeling well, like I had been up and around, like playing, drinking games. And so I was like actively participating in those things, um, having conversations with people. I like kind of vaguely remember talking with some people after I sat down on the couch, but I would think that just like removing myself from playing that drinking game um would have been a sign for folks. Like I literally just I remember like I started to feel really dizzy and kind of nauseous. So I went to sit down, and that's just like not what I had been doing or how I'd been engaging with people before that. So I think that would have been a sign. I didn't like need help walking, but I definitely did feel like kind of unsteady, like a little wobbly. I remember that as I was walking to the couch. And then after that, my memories, that's when it really starts to get pretty blurry. So I can't say a lot about what happened after that, but I think those things would have been obvious to the people who I'd been around and playing those drinking games with.
Did anyone come up to you or ask you how you were feeling or offer assistance in any way?
Not that I can remember after I sat down. And again, I just have that kind of brief memory of having a conversation with a group, but I don't specifically remember if anybody asked if I was okay or if I needed anything.
Okay. Another question I had, going back to when you had said that you and Jacob were kissing on his bed. Do you remember how you were responding at that point? If you were kissing him back, what your body language would have said?
That moment is pretty fuzzy to me, just overall. I remember kissing. And I believe like what I remember is I know I was laying on my back. But I really felt like I couldn't move my body. I remember thinking that I wanted it to stop, but that I couldn't move or couldn't say anything to tell him to stop. Um, I just kind of remember kissing. I remember that my shirt was off kind of at this time. And I didn't remember how my shirt was removed. But I don't really remember a lot about how I was reacting, but I do remember that um, he was kissing me. And I am not sure if I would say that I was kissing him back or not. My memory is just pretty unclear.
Okay. Was he saying anything to you or making any noises at that time?
I don't remember that he was saying anything.
Okay. Any other questions from Liz or Mindy?
I just have one. Have you ever you described feeling the way you were feeling, dizzy and just nauseous. Have you ever had that response or reaction to drinking at any time in the past?
I've definitely had drinks to a point where I felt like a little unwell in the past. Like that's not the first time that that had ever happened to me. Um, but it is one of the few times that I like have legitimate gaps in my memory. So that part was unusual for me.
And did you ever have your drink unattended?
I don't remember, at least while we were playing the drinking games. Like I remember either having my drink in my hand or having it close by. Um, but I was also drinking alcohol that I don't remember drinking according to other people. So I don't know if a drink I had then had been unattended or again, even how I got that drink. So I can only speak to like what I was drinking while I was playing the drinking games at the party.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
I do not have any questions remaining for you either, Michelle. So I think at this point, why don't we take a brief recess? The parties are welcome to speak with their advisors. Our next part of the hearing will be the cross-examination by the respondent's advisor. So asking questions of Michelle. So that would be you, Julia. We'll take a brief recess and get your thoughts together, and then we will come back. So the investigator will send you to your breakout rooms. It is 1:36 right now. We are back on the record at 1:39. Let's see, is everyone ready? Michelle, are you all right?
I'm sorry, my roommate just came in the room. I just reminded her that I needed her to leave. So she's leaving now.
Okay, so there's nobody else in the room with you at this point?
No, she just left and
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. If anybody has an unforeseen interruption, feel free to raise your hand, let me know. We definitely want to make sure that everyone has privacy to be able to listen and to talk as they need to. So you're good now, Michelle. Is everybody else ready to get started? Okay. All right. Excellent. Next, we will do the questions from the respondent's advisor to Michelle. So Michelle, are you ready to proceed with that?
Yes.
Okay. And Julia, are you ready? Be sure to unmute.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Michelle. You had mentioned that you had spent the night with Jacob before. Do you recall approximately how many times you had spent the night with him?
I mean, not exactly, but maybe 2 or 3 times. Spread out.
Okay. And do you recall having sex on those occasions with him?
Um, I don't know particularly. There was at least one trip in November. That was not necessarily at his house, but one time I remember that I had stayed with him overnight where we did have sex, but that one was not particularly at his house.
Okay. And had you been to his room before the night in question?
I had been to his room before this night.
Okay. And you mentioned you were not sure how you got upstairs to his bedroom. But in your mind, is there any way you could have gotten upstairs besides walking upstairs to his room?
I mean, I have no idea how I would have got there this night. Um, I don't have a memory. I mean, I would assume we either walked or he would have had to help me to his room, but I don't know. I don't have any memory of getting there.
Okay. And then you mentioned in the investigative report that you think you remember trying to pull away while you were in bed with him. You said he kept kissing you and touching your breasts. So I guess could you clarify whether or not you do remember trying to pull away?
I remember feeling like I wanted to pull away, but that I couldn't really move my body or say anything in response to what he was doing.
Okay.
Was really confused when I woke up because again, I didn't remember going to his room or how I got there. It was just a really jarring situation to be in at the time. And I felt like I couldn't move away from what was happening.
Later in the investigative report, you mentioned that Jacob referred to other times that you two had had sex. You mentioned that you had hooked up a few times and you'd both been drunk. You said, but this was different. I wasn't just drunk. I was way more than that. So could you share what maybe could have led Jacob to believe that the situation was different from his viewpoint?
I don't remember a lot of what was happening. I mean, for me, that's the biggest thing about this evening is that I've never had any gaps in my memory. I know he also says that I wasn't, and again, this is something that I learned later, that I wasn't really saying anything. I think that's unusual compared to our prior encounters. I don't think we had like full on conversations the other times we hooked up, but I don't think that I was really like completely silent or that I didn't say anything. So that in my mind should have been unusual for him.
In reviewing the investigative report, you note that you do remember being in Jacob's bed. You know, you recalled being in his room. You recalled being without your shirt. You recalled that he was kissing you, that he was touching your breasts. So you recall various details of the encounter. It sounds like you do have maybe more memories of the encounter than were described in the investigative report or in your statement earlier today.
Objection, it's not a question.
Julia, did you have a question after providing that additional information? I agree that there was no question for Michelle to answer in that regard, but if you do have a question, you can ask it.
I guess my question is, do you recall any additional details of the encounter that we have not yet discussed today?
What I've shared today and what is in the investigative report is all of what I remember from this night.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I think that resolves the objection. Any other questions, Julia?
No.
Okay. All right, let's take a recess before we move on to the next steps of the hearing. We'll go off the record at 1:51. We can stop the recording, and then we'll be back in just a few minutes to ask about any witnesses. So the investigator may want to go ahead and check in with any witnesses that we have. The next part of the hearing will be for Michelle to call a witness, and I think we do have one here with us today. So 1:51, we'll be back in a few. We are back on the record at 1:54. Michelle, do you have any witnesses that you wish to call at this time?
Yeah, I would like to call my friend Brianna Lewis as a witness.
Okay. And Heidi, I believe that Brianna is waiting, ready to join. Is that right? Okay. We will take another very quick pause to get her online. And so that everyone knows, first up will be I'll start us off with kind of her introduction, and then we'll proceed from there. So Heidi, go ahead and bring Brianna in, and then we'll be right back. We are back after a very brief recess. Thank you, Heidi, for bringing in our witness today, Brianna. Brianna, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing just fine. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you taking the time. Just a brief intro to where we are going, some of our next steps for your part in this hearing. The advisor for the complainant will begin with questions for you, followed by questions from the hearing panel, and then the advisor of the respondent will also be given an opportunity to ask you some questions. So we'll just take turns kind of around the room. Let's see. I did want to just briefly start though that you, and just so that you know, we reviewed the investigative report that included the statements that you provided during the investigation. I believe you also had a chance to review your statements in the investigative report. And just a reminder to be sure to answer verbally. That was another reminder I should have given, so we have it on the record as being recorded.
Yes, I reviewed my statement.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I guess to start us off, before questions, do you have anything, off the top that you would like to add to your statement?
I do not have anything to add.
Okay, just checking. So first up will be Allison, the complainant's advisor. Do you have any questions for Brianna?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
When you had noticed that Michelle was no longer around and you sent her a Snapchat, do you know how long you waited until you left?
So, like, from what I can remember, it was like, I want to say between like 11:30 and 12 when I left. I can't remember when I Snapchatted her. It's been several months, so I don't remember exactly when I had snapped her, but I remember leaving around like 11:30 to midnight.
Thank you. And then can you kind of just describe how Michelle was acting that night?
So, I mean, like, we were drinking, and so she seemed pretty normal for what she typically acts like when she's drinking, so nothing like overly concerning that I noticed.
Did she mention to you that she wasn't feeling well?
I don't believe she mentioned to me she wasn't feeling well. I mean, like I said, she seemed pretty normal.
Thank you. That's all of my question.
Okay, thank you both. Any questions from the panel? Liz, did you have any questions for Brianna? All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Brianna. You said that Michelle appeared to be acting normally. Would you say that was normal for her being drinking or normal sober normal?
Normal, like drinking for her typical. So it obviously not sober, but like typical for her drinking.
Did you see her spill her beer?
I did, and then she laughed, and so then me and Jacob laughed, and so yeah.
Do you remember where the beer came from?
What do you mean? It came from like a beer bottle?
No. I mean, how did she get the beer?
Oh, I don't know if she got it or if I don't know how she got it. I know she was like during beer pong, we were using like red Solo cups. I don't really know how she got the beer bottle.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mindy, if you have some questions.
I do. Did you ever hand her a drink that night?
Maybe her red Solo cup during like beer pong if it wasn't right next to her, but she was pretty much next to that the whole game. And then before we went to Jacob's like stuff and we were at my place and like I poured shots and I gave those to her.
Okay. Did you have a Corona beer that night?
No, I don't like Corona.
Was that a common beverage that was around?
It's like a typical like beer to have around like a guy's house, I guess. Yeah.
And were those around for anyone to have, or did you notice if anyone, person or persons brought the Corona beer?
I actually do not know if they might have been for everyone, but they might also just like someone might have just brought them. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
They
Thank
were
you.
obviously available.
Okay. Thank you. That was all.
And my apologies if I may have overlooked this, but can you talk a bit about when you left the party, and any conversation that you had with Michelle around that time? Did you locate her, have a conversation about leaving? Can you walk us through that?
I think we talked about it like before we left my apartment in like my place that like I was gonna leave around like 11:30 to midnight-ish. And so like I know she stayed the night with Jacob previously, so when I couldn't find her after like she went to the bathroom, I just kind of assumed that she was just gonna stay with Jacob for the night because I told her what time I was leaving, so I was leaving at the time I said I was.
Did you see her shortly before you left?
The last time I saw her is when she went up to go to the bathroom and then like she just never came back, so I just assumed she was with Jacob or something.
Okay. How would you describe kind of her status, the last time that you did see her?
She just was like giggly, laughy, just having a fun time is what it seemed like.
Did you see where Jacob was when you left?
Um, I remember we were all chatting in the living room. Um, and then I don't really know where he went. So I'm assuming he was probably with her.
You saw them together. Is that what you had stated before?
So like in like a group setting with like other people in the living room, and then she went to the bathroom and he
Mhm.
went somewhere. So
Okay. Did you see them interacting one-on-one?
like in front of me when she introduced me to like Jacob, because it's the first time I've actually like seen him, like I've heard of him, but other than that, I don't think so.
Okay. Let's see. Those were my points of clarification. Mindy or Liz, did you have any other questions for Brianna?
I do, actually, I have a follow-up. Did you see them touching each other or interacting directly with each other while you were there?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. Mindy, did you have anything else?
I do not.
Okay. Well, if you hold on tight real quick, Brianna, we will take a quick break. The next step will be for the respondent's advisor, Jacob's advisor, to be able to ask you some questions as well. So we'll give them a moment just to talk if they need to and make sure that they have questions ready. So we will send everyone to their breakout rooms for just a few minutes. Please, Heidi, thank you. And we can stop the recording. Okay, we are back on the record at 2:08. I believe, Julia, you have some questions prepared for Brianna.
Yes, thank you.
All right, go
Hi,
ahead.
Brianna. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about what you knew about Jacob and Michelle's friendship and relationship, and what you may have shared generally about how that was going.
So I know that after the Denver trip, they like she told me that they had hooked up, and that's kind of like where that ended, and I was like, oh, okay, awesome for you. And then so I know that Jacob had invited Michelle over to like his party, and so like she wanted me to go with, so I did. And so all I really know is that I know they've hooked up, but I don't know how to define their relationship currently. I haven't asked her personally how she defines it. What was the rest of your question? I am so sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I guess just to move forward with that, when you were going to the party at Jacob's house, did she express any concerns about going? Or was she excited to go to Jacob's party and see him?
I don't believe she had any concerns. I mean, like it was like any other kind of party that we would go to and pregame for. It was just kind of like, okay, let's pregame, let's go, let's get in the Uber, let's just go have a good night. That's kind of what the vibes were. We were just hanging out.
Okay. And then once you were at the party, did she ever express or look uncomfortable around Jacob?
I don't think she looked uncomfortable around Jacob.
Okay. And did she ever express any concerns about being at the party or being with him or seeing him?
None that was mentioned to me.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had had a conversation with her prior to going to the party about when you were going to leave, and you said you understood that she might be spending the night with him. I guess what led you to believe that that might occur?
I mean, I know that she said that she had previously spent the night with him, but like she doesn't like always spend the night with him. So when she wasn't ready at the time frame that I told her I was gonna leave, I just kind of assumed that she was just gonna stay the night because like it was nearing midnight. So I was like, okay, well, she's just gonna stay here then, I guess, and I'm gonna go because that's what I told her I was gonna do.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
That's all I have.
Okay, any remaining questions from anyone for Brianna? Okay, seeing none, Brianna, I believe you are finished with your testimony here today. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. You can feel free to drop off and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Brianna has exited the Zoom room. For the record, I did just want to read off some additional information that there were 5 other witnesses in addition to Brianna who provided information during the investigation. They were Jasper Abreu, Jasleen Nape, Siobhan Hughes, Rebecca Lawrence, and Zach Stewart. I want to state again for the record that both parties, through their advisors in a pre-hearing meeting this morning, agreed to include those 5 witnesses' statements from the investigative report without them having to appear at the hearing today. So we won't hear from them directly, but we will be able to consider the statements that they provided. So I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that and to make sure that there were no additional comments or questions on that point before we move along. Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. I did also want to clarify, in addition to those 5 witnesses, as we know, Brianna appeared here today, so her statements will also be considered. Michelle, at this point, do you have any additional evidence that you would like the hearing panel to consider in making its determination?
No, I don't.
Okay. The next part of the hearing then will be for the respondent, Jacob Tower, to provide a statement. He has an opportunity to do so. Then the hearing panel may ask him questions, followed by cross-examination by the advisor of the complainant. There will be a break after the panel asks questions to ensure that the complainant and her advisor can confer and prepare their questions. Before we get on to Jacob's statement, any questions or a need for a break at this point? Okay. Jacob, are you ready to go ahead and make a statement if you wish to do so?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jacob Tower. I want to state up front that the allegations made against me are false and in no way represent who I am. I met Michelle over a year ago in chemistry club, where we became friends. It was my freshman year, and I had decided to try and put myself out there to meet other people and to do new things. I had spent my fall semester mainly by myself, and I didn't have a lot of friends. Then I went to the club meeting, and then I met Michelle. We hung out often, and over time, I thought we liked each other pretty good, and we even became friends with benefits. We never dated, but I would have been open to that had she brought it up. She was just one of the coolest girls I ever met. That friendship lasted until January, though, when Michelle accused me of sexually assaulting her, something that 100% did not happen. Before that night, we had hooked up a number of times under the exact same consenting circumstances, and that night was no different. We both had been drinking. She approached me, she kissed me, touched me, and pulled me toward the stairs to go to my bedroom. She undressed herself, and me a little too. I could not believe the allegations that she had not consented when I got the letter from the Title IX office, because it did not line up with what happened. It didn't line up with anything that had ever happened between us in the exact same circumstances. Dealing with these allegations affected my friendships with other friends. It made me depressed. It caused me to stop socializing as much as I had, and my grades this spring suffered because of it. Now I'm afraid to trust people, because I don't want to get hurt like this again. I don't know why this time was any different than the past times with Michelle and I got together. And I'm sorry that she feels the way she does. I wish we could have worked it out some way other than this investigation, but I did not sexually assault her that night in January. It was entirely consensual. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Are you ready for some questions from the panel if we are ready to proceed?
I'm ready.
Okay. Mindy and Liz, do you need a break or do you have some questions ready?
Mindy, you want to start?
Yes. Hi, Jacob. Regarding like when you both were at the party, did you see her drinking?
Yes, I saw her drinking Corona, and I think she was drinking when she was playing the beer pong.
Okay. Did you ever give her a drink or did you ever hold her drink?
No, I mean, there was some beer in my fridge that was available to anyone who wanted to help themselves, but I never gave her a drink directly, no.
And what beer was in your fridge?
Corona.
That's all I have right now.
Liz, do you have any questions prepared?
I do have a couple of questions. She approached you, is that correct? When your physical interaction began?
Yes.
When you got upstairs to your room, tell me a little bit about how she was engaging in that activity with you. How was she responding to that activity?
Well, we went up to the room because she wanted to go there. And when we got there, we were standing in the room, we were kissing. She took off her own shirt. I think she was wearing a t-shirt that night. She even pulled at mine. I was wearing I think a collared shirt, and I finished taking it off after she indicated she wanted it off. She, there was just a lot of mutual kissing, touching. So for me, it was just like usual in our past experiences.
Liz,
How
can I jump?
much time would you say elapsed when you saw her spill her beer and your physical interaction began?
I can't tell you precisely. It probably could have been an hour, could have been less. I don't know.
And did she continue to drink during that hour?
I think she may have. I wasn't watching her closely. Some of that time I was talking to her friend.
And at some point in the evening, she stopped playing beer pong and went and sat on the couch. Do you recall that?
I do. I saw her go over there, and I went down and sat next to her, and I asked her how she was doing. She said she didn't feel well, and I asked if I could do anything for her, and she said no, because she was feeling better.
So you saw her go to the couch and sit down, and you approached her and sat beside her, and she said, "I'm feeling better."
Yes, yeah.
Is that correct? Did that, what kind of pacing was that? Was that, I mean, was it a while before you went and sat next to her, or was it, she sat down and then you sat down immediately? Tell me a little bit about that.
And I can't remember, it might be that I just looked over and I saw her on the couch, but when I saw her sitting over there, I did go in over there and talk to her.
So she may have been sitting there for a while.
She could have been sitting there for a while or just a couple minutes.
While you were having sex, was she making eye contact with you? What kind of interaction was she giving you while you were having sex?
She was making eye contact. She was actively kissing me, touching. At one point, she actually was on top during the sexual activity.
All right, I think that's all the questions I have. Mindy, do you have any follow-ups?
I do. In the investigative report, you had indicated that you had helped her remove her pants. Can you describe that a bit more in terms of why you were helping her?
Sure. At that point, we were already laying on the bed, and she was on her back. I was above her, and so she started to pull her pants off, and she was in an awkward position to do that because she was laying on her back on the bed. So I helped her pull the pants off her legs.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Jacob. So going back to the portion of the evening when you saw Michelle sitting on the couch and when she said that she wasn't feeling well, did you ask her what had happened or why she wasn't feeling well or how she wasn't feeling well?
Well, after she said she wasn't feeling well, I just asked if I could do anything to help her feel better. And then she told me no, she already was feeling better.
So the amount of time that passed between when she told you that she wasn't feeling well and then when she was feeling better, that was kind of in a quick sequence as you just described it. Is that accurate?
It's pretty quick. We're talking, a matter of a minute or two, probably.
So when she said that she was okay now, how did you assess her demeanor to be? Any signs that she was unsteady or that she was fully coherent or not coherent? Just like, what would you just say was her status at that point?
Well, she was she was talking to me regularly. She wasn't slurring her words or anything like that. So it was just sort of a normal conversation. She didn't on the couch. I don't recall her moving in a way that made me think that she was in any way overly intoxicated or anything of that nature.
Okay, thank you. I think just one more question. Again, going back to her comment about not feeling well, a follow-up to that. What did you interpret that to mean? What kind of not feeling well did you think? Did you think it was because of something that she had drank, or did she have a cold, or what did you assess like that to mean?
Now, I really don't know because I think because she told me she was feeling better, I didn't pause to consider why she was feeling bad.
Okay. I think those were my follow-ups for now. Liz or Mindy, any other questions for Jacob?
I have one brief follow-up. From the time when you were both sitting on the couch together to the point where you went upstairs, what would you say was the timing of that? How much time elapsed between those two things?
I think at least an hour, if not more, because after she said she was getting better, I left and wandering around the party, going outside, coming back inside, talking to her friend. So there was plenty of time between that and when she approached me and kiss me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jacob. I don't believe the panel has any more questions, so next up will be questions from Allison. But I want to take a break now to make sure that both parties have a chance to talk with their advisors if they'd like, including for Michelle and Allison to get any questions together. So we'll take a brief recess, stop the recording at 2:24, and we will be back in just a few minutes. Okay, we are back on the record at 2:28. Allison, as Michelle's advisor, I believe you have some questions for Jacob.
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead.
Jacob, how many sexual encounters do you believe you've had with Michelle prior to this night?
I think around 3 or 4.
Okay. And you had said that you described the night the exact same as those previous night. There was nothing different.
It is exactly the same.
So those 3 or 4 encounters that you had previously, has she always told you she wasn't feeling well?
No, but she said she was feeling better too.
Okay, so there was a difference then in that night to the 3 or 4 previous nights in the fact that she had not told you she wasn't feeling well those previous encounters.
Well-
Objection, that's argumentative. He's already answered that question.
So I am hearing an objection as to argumentative and asked and answered for the questions. Allison, would you like to rephrase your last question, and then that'll be the last question on that particular point?
And no, I'm fine where I'm at. Thanks.
Okay. All right, then that objection will be sustained. Allison, you're welcome to continue with your questions.
Thank you. You had talked about how you had, after you'd received the allegations, that you were withdrawn from your friends and how it was affecting you. Was it the allegations that you were upset about, or was it that your relationship had then changed with Michelle? You had indicated that you had wanted a further relationship with her beyond friends with benefits.
Well, the allegations represent that total just breaking of our trust as I saw it. A friend wouldn't be saying those things about you, the things that were not true, and definitely not something I would do, not do to someone I like.
So you believe that Michelle is lying in regards to that night?
I think she just, for whatever reason, doesn't remember what happened that night.
Did you see Michelle drinking alcohol that night?
Yes.
When you and Michelle were having sexual intercourse, do you feel like she was interacting the same as she had on previous encounters?
Yes.
So was she kissing you back?
She was kissing me back.
All right, I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Allison and Jacob. Does anyone need a break at this point? Okay, looks like everyone is okay. Next, the investigator will be available to answer questions of the hearing panel. The investigator may then be subject to cross-examination by the advisor of the complainant, followed by cross-examination by the advisor of the respondent. So Heidi Shearer is here today. They were the assigned investigator to this case. Does the panel have any questions for Heidi? I'm seeing no for Mindy. Liz?
Heidi, do you feel that the investigative report accurately portrays all the information you gathered during the investigation?
Yes, all the information I collected is in the investigative report.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. I do not have any questions beyond that. What about any questions from Allison, the complainant's advisor? Do you have any questions for Heidi?
No, I do not.
Okay. What about Julia as the respondent's advisor? Do you have any questions for Heidi?
No, I do not.
Okay. Heidi, do you have any witnesses that you wish to call?
No, I do not.
Any additional evidence that you would like the hearing panel to consider beyond what is in the investigative report?
No, I don't have any additional information.
All right, great. Thank you for being here as well. And that will conclude this portion of the hearing. We will now proceed to close the record.